And I'm the treatment center that Joe's been referencing today that has weathered the eye of the storm. Thank goodness for this understanding as we went through this. It's been a challenging few days, but I'm very grateful that we've had this understanding as we've navigated through it. And I think it's made an incredible impact on how we have been able to get through this challenging situation. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm a certified addiction professional. I've been with Golf Recovery since its inception about 7 years ago. And I've taken over as clinical director about 3 years ago. And I'll share more tomorrow about how we work with both our staff and with our clients in an addiction setting. But today we want to offer you the opportunity to hear how our guests have experienced our treatments. We have 3 people on our panel that have been to Golf Recovery specifically. And then we have a couple other panelists who've been through treatment in an addiction setting and other facilities. So I want to thank you this morning, and Lisa, I'll let you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lisa Portinga. I am a 3 principles practitioner. I have my own practice here in St. Paul, Minnesota. And I work as an educator for Gulf Breeze Recovery graduates. When they get done with their inpatient stay, Gulf Breeze provides support for them going out into their lives and continued education around the 3 principles. I also work with treatment courts here in St. Paul and correctional facilities in Minneapolis. And so I've truly enjoyed working within a 3 principles modality. I am continued to be energized and having insights and experience that are truly miraculous, personally as well as professionally. So it's really fun to be part of this conference and see all of this come together and see all of you. And we have an amazing panel. And I am so excited for you to hear their stories. Our first person is going to be Alfie.
Go ahead when you're ready, Alfie.
He's talking, we don't appear to.
Yeah, he's talking, but we don't hear him.
Oh, okay, so then the audio must be not working.
Should we, Sarah, do you mind if we jump to you while we're waiting for Alfie to?
Oh, hi, yeah. So let me take a deep breath. I'm not used to this, and I hope you don't mind. I wrote out some notes the past week, so I'm reading them, but they come from my heart. So, well, I graduated from Gulf Breeze Recovery about 3 years ago, and that's where I learned the principles, and that's where I learned to start tapping into my inner wisdom. And since that time, one of the key elements to my success in sobriety, well, not just sobriety, but peacefulness and serenity and calmness has been my continuing sessions with my educator, Lisa Portinga, who you all have met and who asked me to be a part of this conference I'm so happy about. And I met Lisa via Zoom and telephone prior to leaving Gulf Breeze Recovery, where I had spent 9 weeks. And those 9 weeks were 9 of the best weeks of my life. Leading up to being at Gulf Breeze Recovery, I had started drinking alcohol again after about 14 years of sobriety. And before that, I had been in inpatient treatment for about 30 days when I was in college. And it was a 12-step inpatient program. And I had also been in some outpatient programs throughout my life and had various blocks of time drinking, not drinking, graduating from college, working in nice jobs and getting married and stopping drinking entirely for about 14 years. So then my husband and father of my 14 and 4-year-old daughters died due to melanoma. And about a year after he died, I also found out that my dad, who had stopped drinking when I was in high school, had started drinking socially again. So for some reason, I thought I had outgrown this need to stop drinking. So I started drinking again and obviously had addiction issues. And a friend of mine who had completed a non-12-step inpatient program intervened, and she found Gulf Breeze Recovery for me. And one thing that set the 3 Principles Recovery Program apart for me was that it wasn't this arduous, difficult thing that had to be done. It seemed so simple. It was much simpler than that. It was me listening to my inner wisdom again, loving myself, having the confidence to stay calm in the midst of other people's anger and expectations or whatever else was going on around me. And I'm now able to interact differently with my parents, who I also happen to work with in a family business. I met a group of people at Gulf Breeze Recovery who I still keep in touch with, who were guests there at the same time I was, and we still keep in touch and most likely will for the rest of our lives. Drinking just doesn't make sense anymore. Of course, I thought it could help me again. Of course, it didn't. Of course, it was hurting me. Becky, my counselor at Gulf Breeze Recovery inpatient, used the analogy with me early on that, me drinking, it was like a car indicator light going on, that something else was wrong that needed to be fixed. It wasn't that, oh, I just wanted to have a drink and everything was fine. So that's just one, she was just one of the really stellar counselors there, as well as Danielle. So my relationships immediately improved. I have a very loving new husband. Bruce and I were married less than a year ago. And we started dating after I graduated from Gulf Breeze Recovery. And he is a huge support. We often talk about the 3 principles. We've had some sessions together with Lisa as well. And it was so easy for him to start learning the principles, and we talk about those. And it's a great thing. That's been a blessing to have his support. There aren't a lot of 3P groups here like AA or anything like that. So to be able to have that support is a great thing. I realized that I deserve a healthy relationship and this charming, magical life. I think Joe mentioned the word magical, and it sounds funny, but it's the truth. When these insights start coming, when I started studying the 3 principles, I knew that I was a great mom, and I can be a great mom to my kids now. I'm able to pick up my 11-year-old every day from school and take her to ballet, and I was on the school board before, and I was able to continue doing that and be in a lot of volunteer organizations and just do what I love to do. I always loved running and exercising, and I was able to start doing that again. And I think Joe also mentioned, when we're drinking, for some reason, the exercise doesn't happen. So that started happening again, and all the things that I always loved to do. And it was just so simple and not this pressure to do perfectly the 12 steps, or I know that they can work together, but this was just such a relief to me to know that I could do it this way. And I keep learning and practicing about the principles, and it's really an evolution. And like I said, the insight never stops. Lisa and I have done a couple of book studies, revisiting Inside Out Revolution by Michael Neal that I read in recovery. And we've also read a book together called Real, R-E-A-L by Claire Diamond. And the sessions are really a blast. I mean, we've gotten past talking about all that icky stuff that doesn't really help sometimes, and we can just get quiet and study the principles. And that's why I think Gulf Breeze Recovery refers to counselors as educators, because really that's what it is. It's a continuing education. I know that Barnett Gilmer, who's the director of Gulf Breeze Recovery, he said when I was there that he knew there was a better way to do recovery than what he had seen in other recovery centers. And he really nailed it with the 3 principles approach, because just this holistic approach inside out, it just made so much sense to me. So we read Joe Bailey's book, The Serenity Principle, was one of the first books we read. And I was in the car. I just have a story here, and I'm sorry, I feel like I'm rambling or skipping around, but I just want to tell the story about when I was in the car line at school pickup the other day. And everyone, of course, has to wear masks to school now, and the teachers wear masks. And I said hello to the music teacher, and how are you doing? And she said, I'm doing well, and I'm getting used to this mask thing. If I can just get past my thinking about it, I do just fine. And I said, well, I think of thoughts as leaves that are floating down the river, and we can hang on to the ones that are helpful and just let the other ones go. And anyway, she said, oh, I really like that. So every time now I see her, she says hi, and just being able to be the observer rather than the person that, we're not our thoughts, we're not our feelings, we're much bigger than that. And I know we have a breakout chat session after this, so feel free to ask me any specific questions or general questions, and I'd love to answer them. And thank you for asking me to be a part of this. It's been a great thing to be asked to be a part of this and to have the 3 principles in my life.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah, so much.
That was so touching, Sarah. It's so beautiful. I just want to highlight something that really struck me is that you said, I saw that I deserve this beautiful fairy tale life. And I think one of the most beautiful things about the principles is that people wake up to who they really are. And they realize I'm not all my past things. I'm not my addiction. I'm not all the behaviors that I've done. And I deserve health and well-being. Mm-hmm. And as I allow that for myself, it has the most beautiful impact on those around me that I love the most. So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, I just wanted, excuse me, I just wanted to comment too on Sarah's story about the person at the school. She and I had chatted about that a couple of weeks ago. And it's just so fun when you're walking around with this new understanding, and sometimes it can feel very individual. It can feel like, okay, so this is new for me, or but I don't know if anyone else is understanding. And then this person makes a comment like that, and you go, yes. And it's so fun because you're like, I know exactly what you're saying. And then you could add to that, and then she could feel that connection too. That was awesome.
That's a great thing. Yeah, thank you.
So
well,
our next presenter is going to be Brian. So I'll unmute you, Brian. Unless, did you want to add anything else, Lisa, about Sarah?
Nope. Nope.
I just got a little nervous there. So much of this is really kind of emotional and touching for me, because I knew about the principles from way back in 1989 when my father took me to a Sydney Banks conference. And I was 17 years old, and Joe Bailey introduced Sydney Banks. And I listened, and I knew that Sid Banks had something, and I knew it was something that I wanted. But he said, don't try to figure it out or listen for a feeling and stuff like that. But to me, if I couldn't figure it out in my head, it didn't exist. and I just couldn't get it in my heart. And I think I saw Sid maybe 6 times from about 1989 through something in the mid 2000s to his last conference. And actually, Joe Bailey was my counselor for about a year and a half. And he counseled me, and I think Mavis Karn did, and Cindy Claypatch. And I think even the interns in his practice all tried to get through to me. And I think what had to happen is I had to kind of go through life and get my butt kicked. And, you know, drink alcohol was my drug of choice. And I started when I was 13. I had periods of sobriety. I think my first try was on my own without AA or anything. And then I moved from Minneapolis to Phoenix when I was like 25 or something. And I got into AA in 1998. And I had a period of sobriety for about like 9 years. And it, you know, it wasn't too bad, but I wasn't happy. And at that time, I met my wife and we were dating, and I was sober, but, you know, I just, you know, kept on changing jobs and kept on looking for happiness outside of myself. And had, you know, other addictive behaviors that kind of transferred, and, you know, had mental health problems. And I saw like 12 different psychiatric providers and 12 different counselors. And, you know, they gave me like 12 different answers. So, so that was kind of my search. And we had our first daughter, and I had a relapse in 2007 that lasted about 6 months, and got a DUI, and went into my first 12-step rehab. And I really didn't want to go. I was really hoping there was some other choice to rehabs, and there really wasn't at the time. So I did my best to make it through, and it was a really, you know, top-notch rehab. And I spent 3 months actually, and then I had like maybe 2 or 3 years of sobriety, and then I'd relapsed one day, and that kind of went on. And then we had our second child, and I'll just sort of fast forward through all the drunkalog. And in 2014, it was kind of like I had enough. I hated myself. I hated my life. I hated my wife. Kind of shamefully, I didn't want to be a parent. And I didn't know what to do. And my father had gone back to see Joe Bailey. My father had seen Joe Bailey, I think, in 1983. And he went back to go see Joe Bailey. And Joe said, hey, well, there's this place called Gulf Breeze. And my father told me about it. And I decided to drink full time. So I moved out of the house for 6 weeks. And so I'm drinking and I'm thinking about Gulf Breeze. And I called Reed and I talked to Reed, who was the intake person, and something clicked. And I talked to my counselor there at the time, and I said, you know, I think this is a place for me to go. And that's where I need to be. And, you know, does this make sense to you? And he said, yeah, it makes perfect sense. You know, go with it, go with your gut. So I did. And I got there, and I was heavily medicated due to a bipolar diagnosis, and my mood was flat. And Danielle was gone for, I think, a week or something, and she was going to be my counselor. And so Debbie Trent was the director, and she kind of took over as a counselor for me for the first week. And so I kind of, they adjusted my medications and lowered them and switched them, and that helped. And my wife was going to divorce me, and she couldn't divorce me while I was in treatment. And then the first week I wouldn't have cared. But after about a week or two, I decided, maybe I don't want a divorce. And her birthday came up, and like I said, I hated her. And the first, and I, so I felt like Danielle said, like they love, like love and compassion is kind of like from top to bottom, from the housekeeper and keeping staff to the business people, to the counselors, to everybody. I started kind of feeling love like all around me, and I didn't really realize that, but people told me that I changed after about like 2 weeks. And then I went out to write a letter for my wife's birthday. And for some reason, instead of like, writing just a, generic kind of birthday letter, I wrote all this gratitude that I had about taking trips with her, having kids, and I didn't know where that came from. That just like poured out of me. So, and then like a week and a half or so later, it was like August 4th, they put on a video of Oprah, and it was an interview of somebody who was a meditator. And I was like, who's this guy? He's not three principles. I don't need to, pay attention. I used to think that like listen for a feeling meant like studious kind of listen for a feeling, like sit straight, pay attention, really get into it. And I was just kind of really present that day. And, I just listened, and I saw, tears rolling down the guy's cheek and tears rolling down Oprah's cheeks. And he said, God loves us no matter what. And that hit me. And I felt that love. And I maybe hadn't felt that since I was a kid. So I was 42 at the time. And that was really the big aha for me. And I went and called my wife after the session broke, and she was at work, and she answered the phone, and we talked for maybe a half hour. And she's still planning on divorcing me, And so, we talked, and the next day we had a Zoom, and I'm reading a book, and Danielle came down and she gave me one of Joe Bailey's books on like deep listening or something before this Zoom session. And I read it, and I went into the Zoom session. I only knew one thing to say, and that was, is God big enough? Because my wife's Al-Anon sponsor would say that to her. And so all I remember is just, it felt like this loving energy flowing through me, and the words just came out of me, and I didn't think about anything to say. It just all flew out of me. And it was the most love I ever felt in my life to that point. And I didn't realize until that moment talking with her how much I actually loved my wife. And then I knew after that session, it was a win-win situation, whether we stayed married or whether we divorced. I had a friend for life that was a soulmate. And so I told people when I got down from that was the best day of my life. And it really was. And then, I had another month left, which was good. And then when I got back, I went on a hike with my wife, and I just remember, talking and laughing and crying, and just like, sitting there and just holding hands and just being friends and just being authentic with my wife, and it was like a honeymoon for months. And it was better than the first honeymoon that we had that lasted, a week. I mean, we were just we were just falling back in love again. And my wife would joke with her friends and say that she was dating her husband. And that was the funny thing, because she had told everybody that she was for sure getting a divorce. And my oldest daughter was in second grade, and she wrote a letter to her in her second grade class that she was so grateful that her parents didn't get a divorce, that she cried tears of joy. And and then um, for whatever reason, I thought, I want to put together like a book of quotes of Sydney Banks. And then I thought, well, Sid said, we all have wisdom. And I thought, well, what if I gave it a try? What if I started writing quotes? And that's the only thing I could think of is Facebook. And I started writing quotes on Facebook, and people started responding. And Debbie Trent said, you should write a book. And I thought at first, I said, well, she must tell everybody stuff like this to boost their confidence. And I remember telling this to Lisa, and Lisa said, no, you're probably the only person she said this to. And lo and behold, 5 years later, I wrote a book, and I live in Denver now. And I thought, well, just writing quotes on Facebook was good enough. But the beauty of writing a book is that, well, Lisa actually took my book into the jails. There's 3 copies in Gulf Breeze, so people in Gulf Breeze can read it. And I know of people in my own 3 principles group here in Denver who bought a copy and then passed it along to somebody else. And they read it, and they said it hit them, some of the quotes hit them in the heart. And, I just never, and just even being asked to talk here, the other day I went for a drive with my daughter, and I'm just thinking to myself, 6 years ago, I just never would have fathomed that any of this stuff would have been possible. I was just going there to try to get sober, to try to get on less medication, and to try to, maybe be a little bit happier. Nowadays, love and gratitude are a regular practice in my life, and I cry tears of joy. And along with that, love and gratitude, it seems like lightheartedness seems to tag along with that. It's just kind of what it is. And I was never a writer before any of this happened. And, I thank God on a regular basis, um, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Is that 14 minutes?
That was amazing, Brian. Thank you so much for such a beautiful, heartfelt story.
Thank you.
And I think one of the beautiful things about what you shared is the impact. Those of you that have worked in addiction, those of you that have family members or have been touched by addiction in some way, know the negative ripple effect. And those that get an understanding of the principles, it's such a positive ripple effect that happens. Spouses, kids, families that stay together. And now, Brian, your amazing work that's gone out into the community, your book is phenomenal. You guys should check it out. And the ripple effect it has on others, and the hope. In addiction, so many people feel like they're alone, that nobody knows what they're going through, that they're going to be stuck there forever. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that the principle shares is no matter what we're feeling or we're experiencing, it's always temporary, and that this will pass.
Yeah, and I forgot that I've shared my story with Gulf Breeze guests. you know, and that's been an honor to do that. And, you know, all my years in AA, you know, I think I got asked to share once in like 14 years of being in AA. So,
Well, it's been an honor to have you, and your story and what you share offers such incredible hope and inspiration to others. And
And I would just like to say too, you know, Brian referenced that I take his book into the jails, and they've actually bought copies for each of the groups. They like them so much. And when I was reading from his book, one of the guys said, I said, a friend of mine wrote this book, and one of the guys said, well, your friend must be really, really happy. So that was the feeling that these guys got from the quotes that I was reading. And I thought that was really cool, and I shared that with Brian.
Brian,
So thank you for writing that book, Brian.
thank you.
Brian,
You're welcome.
By the way, people who are speaking, who've written things or made recordings, there'll be a resource list that's sent out to everyone attending the conference, so that if you want to get Brian's book or anyone else's, or audios or website links or whatever, it'll all be on that resource list.
Brian, if you want to share just quickly the name of your book and where it's found.
Okay, so the name is Matters of the Soul, and it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Were we able to get the audio for Alfie sorted out?
He's gonna, we've been trying to get it to work. He's gonna get his phone and see if that works, but he said, put me last.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So Miguel is our next panelist.
Want to mute me?
Yep.
Hello, my name is Miguel. I'm very honored to have been invited to talk here. Thank you, Brian and Sarah, for your moving shares, really. I can relate a lot of things that you are said, because I've been through a lot myself also. I'm going to introduce myself a bit. I'm from Barcelona, from Spain. You can, if you know Spanish people, you can see it by my accent that it's quite clear. I have 2 kids. I'm 42 years old, and I'm an architect, but I'm not working as an architect anymore. And my life has changed in so many ways that I cannot describe it. You know, I years and 3 months ago, you couldn't recognize me by a picture. You know, it just, and I'm not kidding. You know, my weight was 110 kilos. I was using between 5 and 10 grams of cocaine every day. I was gambling every day, and I was drinking like a maniac. You know, and that was the end of the road. You know, and you know, sometimes I listen to people that I hit rock bottom. Well, I don't know what rock bottom is, because I don't think there is rock bottom. I know there is more and more and more, because I have been there myself, you know, and it's never ending, you know, the addiction path, you know, and it really got me very, very, very hard, you know, and and it was not, it was not my intention really, because I was married for 20 years with an exceptional woman. She's a top executive in a bank here in London, where I live now. Now I'm divorced, but happily divorced. We have a good relationship. Thanks a lot about what I have learned. I have 2 beautiful kids of 6 and 3 years old. I was not able to be I tried to be a good father, but I wasn't able to do that. And And the last 2 years of my addiction, you know, I even couldn't be around them. So every time that I was seeing them, I had to leave the house because my guiltiness was so huge that I couldn't take it, you know. And finally, all these addiction problems, you know, it's a big ball. Finally, the last year was awful. You know, I never had big conflicts. I self-destroyed all my life, but never had big conflicts. And the last year of my life was crazy, you know, and I had conflicts with police. I had conflicts with a woman that I cheated my wife. I paid for sex. I did everything that I never did before. And it was going more and more and more because it was never enough for me, never enough, you know. One day at this time I could gamble, I could have sex, I wanted more and more and more and more. I had like first I have like a hole like that that I needed to fill, and then the hole was big, and it was not, you know, it was impossible, you know. And I ended up not because I asked for help, because I was so proud, and also I think I didn't have enough information. Nobody of my family knew or about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I didn't ask for help to go to rehab or nothing. I went to rehab because I had a sentence of the police, because they told me or rehab or jail, and then I chose rehab. And then from there, I went to rehab in Spain, to a British rehab that is called Step 1 Recovery. And there I had, I thought, well, I was booked for 3 months. I thought, well, if you are here, you have to give it a chance, you know, just try. Because I thought that I was so focused on my thinking that I thought that everything that existed was in my thinking, you know. So I thought that no one could teach me anything. That was my understanding, you know. And there, you know, I had, I'm very close to the 3 fellowships: Gamblers Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, where I'm part of in London. But there I met Amanda O'Shea, that it's here in this Zoom, and she introduced me to the 3 principles. And I think it was key for me to see a light, because when I understood, I was a mess at that moment, a mess, you know, totally a mess, emotionally weak. I was divorcing inside the rehab. I didn't have anyone. I haven't spoken with any of my family for 2 years. You know, I never thought I could reach that point, never. And when I saw that really nothing from the outset could affect me, because really that everything came from my thoughts, you know, that my feelings came from my thoughts. Just this simple understanding just made it all, you know. It just, because then I thought, well, you don't need the others to get well, because if you get well, that's it. You know, you only have to own your feelings. You only have to understand yourself, because I thought always that I was depending on everyone, you know, and I had to. And for me to be happy, I had to make happy my mother, and for me to be happy, I had to make happy my wife, you know. And then I was living in a kind of chasing happiness, feeling, you know, chasing that everything around me had to be all right, you know. And then I understood that I was completely wrong. and my belief systems went down. It was very hard, you know. I felt like a child. I felt like miserable, because I saw myself that, you know, I was, you know, I thought, wow, you know. But from there, I had, you know, I thought that I had a chance, and you know, it has been from that point, my recovery, and also with the help of the 12 steps, because I really believe in them. For me, both understandings came from a similar place. They come from taking responsibility of your actions and not blaming the outside world, you know, because when you understand that everything comes from you, that all that matters is in your head, that finally nothing can affect you, then you understand that whatever other human being or other animal or whatever they do, it's not their fault. It's you that you are projecting something in them, you know. And then it's so liberating to see it like that. It only hasn't affected my life, because from there I thought, well, you need to love yourself, you need to take care of yourself, and then I started to do that, you know, and naturally, like I never did before, never. But naturally, because I thought, well, if all that matters is in you, you have to take care of yourself, but really with care, you know. And I started to eat slowly for the first time of my life. I started to do, you know, to do the simple things that I never did, to brush my teeth with care, to put creams on my face, to make more exercise, to enjoy exercise, to choose the things that I love about life, but the healthy things, not the unhealthy things. And also I started to recover the relationships, you know, because my children, for example, that they have been so important to me, of course, I thought that they annoyed me, you know, when they were shouting, when they were running, when they were doing like child things. But when you understand that they cannot annoy you, because, you know, it's you that you are angry, and then you are thinking that they annoy you, you know, or that you have guiltiness and they are, so it's you, it's not them. So now when they are saying daddy, 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 daddy 1,000 times in 1 minute, they don't annoy me, because I see the innocence, you know, and I accept them as a child, you know. And the same happened with two cats that I'm living now. So at the beginning of my recovery, my cats were annoying me. But I thought, well, how an animal can annoy you? You know, an animal is an animal, you know. And then from understanding that it was me, then I have developed compassion, you know, to understand other human beings, other animals, and it's not, for me, it's not a one like, you know, one day that I saw the light and that's it. No, for me it's a training, you know. It's and it's so beautiful, because I'm discovering through the 3 principles, through the 12 steps, you know, through the well-being life, through, you know, I'm discovering more and more light, more and more wisdom, more how can I apply my skills, the good things that I have in myself, how can I apply it in the world, in the people that I care, in the best way possible, you know. But little by little, you know, I don't run anymore. Because I know that I don't need anything at all, you know. I know that, you know, I don't need love, because before I needed love, and love, it's maybe the most beautiful thing in my life. But I have it, you know. It's on me, you know. I have it, so I don't need it from another person. If it comes, it comes, but I don't need it. And I don't need, of course, to harm myself anymore. I don't need to fix myself with shopping. I don't need myself with gambling or whatever, you know. If I do it, okay, I do it, but I don't need it, you know. And from knowing that, I'm able to choose whatever it's better for me. And this freedom of choosing, it's new for me, because I was always trying to fix myself. I was trying to reach happiness very quickly, and this way of living, it's I have the feeling that I'm only in the first steps of my life. You know, I'm 42 years old. I'm an architect. I study a lot. I work for big companies, but I don't work because it doesn't mean a lot to me. That so, but and I live a long marriage, but I have the feeling that I'm in the first part of my life. You know, I feel like a baby in some ways, because the perspective I have, it's so different that You know, I go slowly now, and I try to see what's going on around me, try to enjoy whatever it comes. I don't push anything at all. I try to always to have to be in second line and to be understanding, to be respectful, and just life is, you know, life is so much better like that for me. And not, you know, not trying to achieve. My level of ambition has decreased. So it's not, I'm an ambitious person, but before it was a problem for me. And now I'm trying to deal with that, you know, I'm trying to deal that maybe it's not so bad, maybe it's not, sometimes it's bad because, you know, I won't go too deep in my ambition. So I know expectations are hopeful. So I'm trying not to have too many expectations. And yeah, so it just, I have so much gratitude about three principles because they just they are truth for me, you know. So when I'm lost, it's very easy, you know. Sometimes I'm listening my voice or my two voices or my three voices, I don't care. It just and I know it's not real, you know. It's like it's my thinking, and then I think, okay, again, you know. But then the world is outside, it's not in me, you know. My thinking is very limited. So if just knowing that, just being humble to understand that that is very limited, it allows me to connect better with the outside. And and it's really nice to live that like that, you know. So I think I'm gonna leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel.
Yeah.
I love the way, Miguel, you described the inside out so beautifully, so practically. You know, just describing your day and how you now interact with your kids and your pets and just the world around you. That was so beautiful. The inside out perspective. It was really, really perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So often, especially those of us that are therapists, you know, we can think, okay, we take this thing and we apply and plug it in. But what you're hearing throughout all these stories is the implication. And, you know, Amy, you referenced this earlier too, how things can happen with ease. You know, Sarah, you mentioned, you know, really seeing that you are worthy and loving yourself and feeling like you deserve. And as we love ourselves and we feel like we deserve, we begin to have our actions change by nature. It no longer makes sense to do the unhealthy things that we were doing, and things begin to fall away. This paradigm is often referred to something as where things fall away and it's easier, instead of an old paradigm where we're adding and doing more and it's more effortful. Thank you for sharing. So I think our next presenter is going to be Bart.
It's Bart.
Hello?
Hey, Bart.
Hey, okay. Well, before I forget, I want to, because I will forget if I start talking, but one of the things that I can totally relate to that Miguel just hit on is my experience since this understanding from the inside out. And it's the, you know, sometimes I miss having this ability, but once you know how our experience works, you lose that opportunity to blame others or outside circumstances for our feelings or my feelings from my experience. And that's something that has been, I'm just so grateful to exist with that understanding, because it changes everything. It changes my relationships with myself and my relationship with myself and my relationship with others. And as Lisa mentions to me multiple times, it allows me to have more compassion for others, and also recognize others' innocence. Lisa, that's something you've have shared with me over the years, and I much appreciate it. But I wanted to touch on that before, if I started talking, I'd forget about it. But it's been, over the last 4 years, it's been a major part of my life. So now I'll back up and introduce myself. I'm Bart McCrory. I'm 45 years old. I have a soon-to-be 14-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. I was first introduced to the principles in Gulf Breeze recovery, like Sharon and Brian. That was that's when I was introduced. I had no experience with the 3 principles prior to going to a drug and alcohol treatment center. When I share my story, which, by the way, is one of my favorite things to do now, and thinking back on my experience prior to treatment or prior to going to Gulf Breeze recovery, it's really odd to hear myself say that sharing authentically my story is one of my favorite things to do, because prior to treatment, there was no such thing as me sharing a story with someone authentically. It was constantly trying to change or spin who I was to match what I thought the person or group standing in front of me wanted me to be, or what could I do or say to, gain someone's approval. And that's how I live my life. And it's so different now. And so I guess the best way I could describe it is liberating to put myself out there and be okay with how anyone may perceive me. And I don't know, that's been a fun part of recovery. So when I share my story, it helps me to break it down between my life of addiction and my time in treatment and my life since then. So I'll start with addiction and prior to treatment, and without going into any war stories, because I guess they're sometimes fun for the listeners, not really applicable today. I'll just give you a general idea of how I spent the 9 years of my life leading up to treatment. And every day was basically the same. I started my day 6 o'clock, 6:30, I would leave my house and I would start drinking. And on the way to work, I'd get to work, I'd spend a couple hours there, go out, drink some more, come back to work, I say work, I was doing some things, but I'd spend a couple hours in the office, drink some more, go out, go back to work, and drink some more, drive home, buy more alcohol, drink, and go home to my family, have dinner, go to bed. And every day during this time, basically every day, that was going to be the last day I ever drank. So I would go to sleep. I'd sleep for 2 or 3 hours, wake up worried, and I'll share the worried here shortly, but worried, stay in bed for a couple more hours, wake up, repeat the process. Every day for 9 years. Well, actually a little longer than that, but I'll get to that in a minute too. But I mean, that was basically my existence. And on top of this, I kept it a secret from everyone in my life, including my wife, but everyone. No one knew about my drinking. On top of that, so I went to a 12-step outpatient program in 2008, and stopped drinking for a time period there. And prior to the couple of years prior to going to that outpatient 12-step program, I was doing the same thing. My days consisted of the same thing, except for I was not a non-drinker at that point. So as far as anyone knew, I started my drinking on the way home from the office every day. So it was a little bit easier, I guess, because I wasn't having to totally lie about my drinking. I just had to lie about the part of the drinking from 6 o'clock a.m. to 5:30 p.m. every day. I didn't have any, well, I guess I was perceived as, or others would have perceived that as a functioning alcoholic. Although looking back, the term function is nowhere part of that experience. But I didn't have any real consequences. I was never arrested. I was able to maintain, which is crazy to even think about, but maintain a relationship with my wife. She would catch me from time to time over these years, and I would, as a lot of us in addiction are able to do, I was able to talk my way out of it or convince her otherwise that it was a one-time thing and I had a stressful day. But back to the consequences, I never really had any significant consequences other than I just felt like a total lying, worthless piece of crap, basically, every day. And I wanted so bad to not be a drinker and be the person I was trying to portray to others that I was. Well, at least at that time, I thought. I mean, who knows what I was trying to portray depending on the particular day, but I didn't like my existence. I didn't like the husband that I was. I didn't like the father that I was. I didn't like the son, friend. And during this time of the lying and deceit, I totally distanced myself from basically everyone in my life. And I would see those people from time to time that I distanced myself from, and I'd get the pats on the back because all of them throughout this 9-year period assumed that I was in recovery or thought that I was in recovery since 2008. So that just led to more of my feelings of disgust with myself and disgust, fraud. I mean, name it, a lot of things. So if I point to a consequence for myself, it was how I felt about myself. Didn't like myself. Being worthy of love from another human being was not part of my existence during my addiction. So I'll jump in now to my time in recovery and GBR. Well, before I go there, I'll say, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I absolutely know this now. And by the way, I checked into treatment in January of 2017. But my recovery and treatment started the couple of weeks prior to the day I walked in the door at Gulf Breeze Recovery. And that was when I opened up and authentically shared with another human being what had really been going on in my life for the previous 10, 11, 12 years, however long time. But that's when my recovery started. And it ties into, at that time, I like I said, I had no exposure to the three principles, but it ties into the understanding. And that's when my recovery started, when I was able to be okay, share my story and be okay with how I was perceived. When I was looking for a treatment center, I knew that the 12-step program, although it works for many people and it's helped thousands, millions of people throughout the years, for some reason, I didn't think it would work for me. And I can only go back to the fact that I could never get past even during that time, when I was looking for a treatment center and I genuinely wanted help, I couldn't get past step one, that I was powerless. And I absolutely know that not to be true now, but at the time, even then, during my state at that point, I guess you would call it my innate wisdom that allowed me to be put in a place where I was going to be introduced to a different understanding of kind of how our existence on this earth works. So I did some research around the country looking for a non-12-step program. I was still operating heavily from that point to where others' perception of me was very, very important. So I wanted to find a place somewhere. I'm in the Gulf Coast area in South Alabama, and I felt like, okay, I need to find somewhere in Minnesota or Los Angeles or Miami, somewhere to where other people will know that I'm serious when I'm going off to treatment. And I'd come across GBR several times in this research, and every time I would see it, it was in Pensacola, Florida, and that's an hour from my home, and that was not an option for me because that would not be perceived as me being serious about getting help. It was too easy. It was too close. So I just discarded it and said, well, Gulf Breeze Recovery is not an option. So I continued my search, and to this day, I can't point to any reason or any significant event that caused me to choose Gulf Breeze Recovery and lead to a treatment that involved exposure to the three principles and an inside-out understanding. Other than, I mean, I think about it from time to time, and there's no explanation other than a higher power other than myself was involved in that decision. And I can't believe I've made it this far in talking that I haven't used the word gratitude, or maybe I have, but that's one of the things that I have to be intentional sometimes when I speak, to not use grateful and gratitude, because it's something I could spend this entire time talking about how grateful I am for so many things that have happened in my life over the last 4 years. And one of those things is, for whatever reason, I ended up in a treatment facility that offered me exposure to a three principles understanding, or inside out understanding. It happened by luck or higher power or whatever you want to call it. But like a lot of things that have happened in my life over the last 4 years, it had nothing to do with anything that I did or anything that I see this all the time now. Things happen, and it's not a reflection of something that I did or that I made happen or the act of doing, which is also so different than the way I operated previously in my life, and so much easier. In treatment, I was able to love myself again and realize that I was worthy of others' love. And that's one of the game changers, as I will call it. But I go back and I speak at GBR. I haven't in some time now, but early on in this process, I did it often. And one of the things, and this sums up my time at GBR, one of the things that I do when I'd go back to speak to the guests is I go sit out on a beach area outside of the building there where I spent a lot of time while I was in treatment, reflect. And I go there intentionally to reflect on my time while in treatment. And I go through this process, and it kind of gives me chills thinking about it now and thinking about we'll call it a transformation, because that's absolutely what it was. The transformation that I went through while in treatment, from sitting on that beach by myself the first day I came out of detox, and being full of anger and self-pity and why me? What did I deserve to do? What did I do to deserve to be here away from my family, away from my kids, by myself at a treatment center? Starting from there, and the last few days, or I would say the last couple of weeks, my time in treatment, sitting on that beach, was a total transformation to, I was still saying why me, but it was from a total place of gratitude and happiness. And why was I able to experience what I had just been able to experience over the last 7 weeks? Why was I chosen to be given the opportunity to, at that time, I thought I was going home. I was similar to Brian when I didn't find this out till afterwards, and I know I'm jumping around, so I'm sorry, but I didn't find it out until afterwards that, when my wife dropped me off at GBR, that was it for her. So my last few days at GBR, I was, thankful that I'd gone through, or I'd started this transformation. I wouldn't say it was complete, because it never really changes. That's another thing about this understanding that is such a blessing, that it's always changing. But me sitting at that space on the beach after being in treatment and having exposure to this understanding, my existence at that point was full of happiness and gratitude, and there was no fear. There was no fear of what might happen. There was no fear of going back into an environment that was not a treatment center. And coming from how important that the level of importance that I placed on, what can I do to control things that may happen to me, or things that, or how people may feel about me. Going from that place to the end of treatment where I didn't care and I knew it was going to be okay and there was no fear there. I've thought about ways to describe it. It's really indescribable. It's a miracle, and it still continues to be a miracle. When I've mentioned to Lisa, I keep mentioning her name. So Lisa is my counselor, and she and I have developed a relationship since leaving GBR. For the first year, we spoke weekly, and maybe first couple of years, and then bumped it back to every other week. And for the last year or so, we speak once a month. But I remember one time when I was talking to Lisa, and it was before I was going to go speak to the guests at Gulf Breeze Recovery. And I was going back to that thinking that I've experienced my entire adult life is, the importance of how people may perceive me. And I said something to Lisa about, I can't go in, or I need to somehow say it's hard. I can't just go in and say how easy this recovery is for me. And she stopped me pretty quickly, and I think her words were, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to spin the story to an audience that may want to hear how difficult and how hard recovery is. That's not been my experience. And again, there's nothing I've done that I can point to that made my experience not as difficult as others, but it's my experience. And that's another thing that I'm grateful for on an almost daily basis. I can think on, after all that drinking I did, I can count on basically one hand over the last 3, almost 4 years, how many times I've genuinely thought about taking a drink, or thought maybe it'd be a good idea in this situation. And I'm just so grateful that's been my experience. Sure, I go back to my, I'd say, old way of thinking. The thing I do most is when I'm in a discussion or I'm in front of a different group of people, I find myself going back to the way of thinking of what can I do and say to gain these people's approval. But the beauty of knowing what I know now, and once you know, you just know. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but once you know, you know. But I find myself, I catch myself really quickly when I go back and start acting a certain way, or I start saying things that aren't authentic. And I'll refer to Lisa again. One time when I shared this with her, I couldn't find a description of the feeling that hits me every time I go back there. And the term she used was yuck. So I'll say yuck. That's my description of the feeling, and it's not a good feeling. It's not. But it's a nice. Odd to use the term nice, but it's a nice memory of the way I used to operate. And when I say nice, it goes back to me being grateful of how I operate now, and how unimportant others' approvals are in how I live my daily life. So my time after treatment, and I'll start with this, and it.
Or you got just a couple minutes because we've got one more speaker. We're a little tight on time.
Thank you. That's why I'm using notes, because not to keep notes, but to try to run through this time and hit all my notes. So after treatment, Joe Bailey came down and spoke to a group of us graduates, as they call us. I'll call myself a graduate too. But he said something and it stays with me. And you can't understand this unless you've lived through addiction. But Joe mentioned that addiction can be and is a blessing to those of us that recover. And as soon as it came out of his mouth, it was like, my thought was, wow, yes. And it truly is. Blessings from, I view my addiction and the time I spent in addiction as a blessing. From small things like being able to walk my daughter down the aisle of Target on a random Tuesday night and being present with her, and because she forgot she forgot some project she had to do at school, and here it is at 9 o'clock on a random Tuesday night, and I'm able to walk down the aisle of Target buying poster board paper. Not everyone gets to experience that type of gratitude for something that small. And sure, we may have gone through, myself and others gone through some tough times to get there, and you'd say we earned it or whatever. I just say we're lucky, and I'm fortunate to have the blessing of addiction in my life. And I'll wrap it up there if I need to, and I'm sorry if I ramble, but I'll close with saying how grateful I am and honored to be able to talk to a group of people like yourself and the people in my life like Lisa and Danielle and Barnett with Gulf Breeze Recovery. I know I'm absolutely worthy of the life that I've been able to experience over the last 4 years. Sometimes I do go back into a place to where if I think about how I treated people and myself, I'm not worthy of it, or I don't deserve it, but we all do. And I'm grateful to have this time in front of you all. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Bart. That's amazing. I think one of the things that really comes through from you and a lot of others is the gratitude and the impact that it's had in your life and all the other areas. You know, people think this is just about addiction, but it improves all areas of our life. The love and the joy and the happiness and the self-love and the relationships, it all changes by nature. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bart. And I'm so happy to know the authentic you.
So we've got just a few more minutes. And we've got Alfie as our last speaker, and then I know most of us will be around for questions right after. I don't think we'll have too much time for a question during session time.
Am I ready? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank God. Quickly, just sorry for earlier on and making the order all change. My name's Alfie Chambers. I'm 39 years old. I come from, just quick little bit of background on me. I come from a Romani Gypsy background. All my parents are Gypsies, grandparents. What that means, we're a very, very tight, cultured community. We've got some very, very strong belief systems, and as children, we're brought up a lot quicker than the average child. So, for example, boys at an early age are learned how to fight and earn money, and the girls are learned to look after the house and bring children up. We also marry young. I married young at 18. I'm 39 now. I've been in and out of prison all of my life, most of my life, since I first went to prison at the age of 14. Started using cannabis at the age of 14 in prison. And like I said, I'd married quite young, so I had 2 lovely boys. 5 years into my second birth of my son, I found out that he wasn't mine. My wife had had an affair, and I brought him up for 5 years, and he turned out not to be mine. I was actually in prison when that happened, so it it made things come on top of me even more so, because I couldn't go and sort it out. My world stopped. To explain it like that, my world just crumbled to the point where I tried committing suicide. If I'm honest, I don't think I had the courage to go through with it, which I'm glad of. But yeah, and that was when I was introduced to heroin, and heroin solved all that for me. Heroin took all my problems away. Heroin was my blanket, my comfort, you know. He wrapped his arms around me and said, "Oh, don't worry, me and you can do this together. We don't need no one else. It's just me and you." And that was my life. You know, I had 14, 15 years of hard drug use, in and out of prison. I've not been out of prison longer than 3 months. I've been in and out. And as well as heroin was good to me, it was also bad to me as well, you know. Sometimes he'd say to me, "Yo, you let me get low last night. Don't let that happen again, because I won't be so good to you." So it wasn't all good, but for most of it, it took my problems away. And just skipping forward, in 2014, me and my brother was yet in prison again. I'd just gotten another 8-year sentence for an armed robbery. My drug use was out of control, you know, from pharmaceuticals to me smuggling drugs into the prison any way I could. You know, I was in a very bad place. Being a gypsy, we know other gypsies or people were married into, and in this particular prison I was in, there was this one gypsy boy that used to walk around with his Bible, preaching the Bible. He never ever put anything on me, but he just always preaching it. I was like, "Stay away from me, Bible basher." And, you know, one day he just walked up to me out of the blue and he was like, "You need God in your life." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever, mate." Took the Bible, threw it in my cell and left it there for, I don't know how long it was, but I think a couple of weeks passed. And, you know, I was in a low place. I had these suicide thoughts going through my head again, of depression. Once again, I'm back in jail. I'm taking pharmaceutical drugs because I can't get the real thing. And I took a glimpse of this Bible in the corner of my eye, and, you know, I picked it up, opened the first page, and it was a blank page, but there was a message written on it. And that message was quite dear to me, so I'll paraphrase it. And it was like, "Dear Alfie, no matter where you are in life, what troubles you're in, here's my phone number. Call me and I will look after you." And like, that was like, wow, that blew my mind. I was like, so he don't see the drugs. He don't see my suffering, my pain. He don't see the bad. He just sees me, the real me. And I was like, wow, there must be something in this. So, you know, I took my Bible that night and I got down on my hands and knees and I was like, "Dear God, please, if you're real, give me a sign. Show me that you're real. I need help." And bang, nothing happened. But there was a but. The very next morning, my cell door opened and there's a commotion on the landing in the prison, and there's a room at the back, door open, and this lady standing there with this big smile on her face. And I'm like, "Yo, what's going on over there?" So I walked over and I was like, "What's happening?" It's like, "What do you do? Who are you?" She was like, "Oh, my name's Jacqueline Hollows, and I run a group called Beyond Recovery." And if I'm honest, all I heard was recovery. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I need that. I need recovery. Please, can you put my name down?" She was like, "Yeah, what's your name?" I told her my name, Alfie Chambers. She was like, "Oh, you're on my course today. Go in and sit down." I was like, "Really?" So I walked in, and, you know, if that's not God or spiritual intelligence, divine mind, whatever you want to call it at work, then I don't know what is, but, you know, I went in the room, an hour passed, and like, if I'm honest, I was sitting there thinking, what the hell is going on with all these hippies, this peace, love, I didn't even know what compassion was, but, you know, and they're all smiling, and I'm like, this is a cult. They're trying to brainwash me. But the funny thing is that there was, it's so hard to explain, but there was this feeling in the room that, you know, it just kept me going back week after week. You know, it was a 10-week program, one day every day for 10 weeks. And it just kept, I now know what kept me in that room, but I'll get to that in a bit. But, you know, I just kept going back. And my brother, who's my co-defendant, you know, he's on drugs as well. He was in prison with me as well. And the class where he was meant to be in on that day was shut for some reason. And he didn't want to go back to his cell. So he was like, I'm going to try and get in your group. And I was like, oh, I don't think you can do that. But Jacqueline being Jacqueline, she was like, yeah, of course you can come in. You know, and he comes in and he's a little bit don't want to be there. But Jacqueline, I think it was Jacqueline or someone was writing on the whiteboard, the river of thoughts and how thoughts just come and go in our head. And my brother started talking about the crime that we're in for. And he was like, nah, that's nonsense because my brother done this and I done that. And then my brother jumped through here and he done this. And I was watching him and he was elevating out of his seat. He was back at the crime scene. Like I could see it in his like what he was doing. And I was like, wow, I wasn't going through none of that. What he's explaining. I was actually crapping myself. And like I always knew that we think. Like, I knew that. Like that's common sense that we all think. But I just thought, like, for example, we're all on this Zoom call. I just thought we're all on this Zoom call. I didn't know there's some of you sitting there now not even listening to me. Some probably thinking, what's this idiot going on about? And some probably going, wow, that's so amazing. Like, you know, we've all got our own realities. And that was my first insight into separate realities. And I was like, oh my God, it's thought created. I created the story that there's something wrong with me for my thinking, because if I thought being a gypsy, I meant to look up to my elders and do as they said. And like, I was always scared to do these things, but I kept my hand on my wisdom that told me, no, you don't want to do that. Because if I thought there was something wrong with me. And that for me was like I had insight after insight. You know, things started happening for me. I got a job as I stopped taking drugs. I went to the doctor, I stopped my medication. It was hard for the first few nights, but seeing the insight into thought, I was able to deal with it a lot better. And I know that sometimes some of the pains that I was feeling were created by me, because of the moment I started thinking, oh, I need drugs, I started to get them feelings. But I'd stopped taking drugs. I started working as a drug coach for the drug team, and everything was buzzing. I thought I'd conquered life. I was like, yes, I've solved life. I'm walking around the prison on a high level of consciousness, and I was buzzing. I was I was the most trusted prisoner in the prison, like me. Before this, understand, I wasn't even trusted to hold a broom and sweep the landing. And now I'm walking around like anywhere in the grounds. I can go anywhere. And I got moved to a special bit of the prison where it was for trustees. You don't get banged up. You like locked in your cell, you stay out. And things were flying for me. And then something happened. A quantity of drugs was found on the wing, mobile phones as well. And I got accused for it because I was the last person seen going in that room where they was found. I got accused for it. I lost my DCAT, which is where I can go to open prison and go home and see my family. I'd lost that. I'd lost my job. I'd lost everything. And I went back to them hurt feelings that I had when my wife left, when I found out the baby wasn't mine. And I went back to the only way that I knew how to get rid of them was drugs. But something amazing happened to me that night. I know that sounds so strange saying that I took drugs and something amazing happened. Yeah, I know drugs alter the brain, but you know, I took the drug and nothing happened. I never got no relief. I never got no relief whatsoever. My pain and my hurt was still there. And I was like, oh my God, of course. the relief doesn't come from me. The relief doesn't come from the drug. The relief comes from me. You know, all the times I used to think about my wife and get them hurt feelings, I would think I need drugs to get rid of that. And then I'm thinking of the drugs and then feelings go away, and I associate it with the drugs. And like, I was like, what? So all my life, what other things have I made stories up about? And I'd just say through all that of hurting, I had a not a vision, but I had an analogy that popped into my head. I'm sitting in my cell with this feeling, and we've all been, most of us have been on aeroplanes, and you know, we're flying an aeroplane, and the seatbelt sign comes on to plug in your seatbelt because you're going through turbulence, and no one likes going through turbulence. It's scary. We think the plane's going to crash, but we just trust in the pilot to fly us out of it. And I had that analogy come into my head, and I was like, look, you don't like this feeling, but your body's built for turbulence. If you just plug in your seatbelt and trust in your inner self pilot to guide you out of it, you will come out of it. And you know, I believe that we're designed to flow in life like that. You know, it's through our analyzing and everything else and conditioning that keeps us down and keeps us there. From that insight, you know, I grew up, I grew stronger. And look, I'm not saying that I don't have bad days. This is not a happy pill that solves everything and you're constantly walking around with a smile on your face, because you're not. But the knowing, like Bart said, the knowing of where that comes from. Well, like everyone said, the knowing of that is generated by you. Just means you don't have to pay attention to it. You don't have to try and ignore it and cover it up with something else. Like, for example, me with drugs, you know, I see that my drug use is no different than someone's coffee use. It's just got a different stigma behind it. You know, if your relief is coffee or your relief is the gym, or, you know, then that's your relief. And if you think that it comes from that, then that's how it's going to feel. And until you see that different, then change can happen instant. The moment that I noticed the resilience that we have as human beings, that this innate health that we all talk about, you know, look, when we talk about love and compassion, that's just a word that we're trying to put on something that, I think Joe mentioned it earlier, that's just a word that we're trying to put on something that we can't explain. But for me, I see that when sorry, this is why I didn't want to use my phone. Am I still here? Yeah, sorry, that's why I didn't want to use my phone. I see that when we drop from personal thinking to here, you can only drop into that space, that inner space of where wisdom is always available. You know, it's always there. Wisdom is always there to be tapped into. Everybody can tap into that. That's not something that's learned, or it's just available for us to tap into. I was lucky enough to be able to do the practitioner course, which to teach the 3 principles. And for me, the underlying thing about the 3 principles is, like, I think you said it earlier on, Danielle, that it's not just for addiction. Even though some of us find it in different places. Like, I turned up in there to, you know, drugs was my thing. And I turned up wanting to get rid of that. I didn't know how, but wanting to. And all Jacqueline done was shine a mirror on me and show me that I've got that in me already, that innate health to do that. And I did get rid of that. But also what else that does is it drops so many other things off as well. I look at it as it's like building a new house. You know, you had a lofted conversion, then you had a garage, then, like, it's always learning and something else falls away. Like even it's funny because of, I'm going to share this, even to this talk now. This morning, Jacqueline phoned me and I was like, oh my God, mine's at work because I meant to phone you because of, I'm ready to make an excuse up. I don't want to do this talk. Like, I'm not worthy to do this talk. I've got nothing to offer. I don't want to do it. And I've been having them thoughts for the last week because of, normally I've got someone with me like Jacqueline or one of the lads, and that's my comfort space again. And I had an insight into the inside out just now because of the moment that I was going to speak and the audio went, my anxiety and everything went away because of, I'm now trying to have a conversation with Peter, trying to figure out how to sort this out. And I'm not thinking about it no more, my anxiety. And I'm like, another blind spot, of course. You know, and it's just so amazing how this thing that we talk of, you know, the three principles, how I think it was, but you said as well, like, it's so simple, like, it's so simple, but it's only simple when you see it. And it is simple. You know, I love how simple that it is, but that's not to say that, you know, I don't have down days, because of course I do. The difference now is that I know not to analyze on it. I know not to pick at it. It's just my thinking. It's just, that lets me know actually that where I'm at. And yeah, so I'm aware of time as well. So I'll finish it there. Sorry if I rambled on. And once again, sorry for pushing Sarah under the boat so that she had to go first. So apologies.
We're just so happy that you got to participate. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's an honor.
And I think it's beautiful that you highlight the innocence in life, and it's something I like to share at our treatment center. Like, I think sometimes people with substance use get a bad rap, but we all have our blind spots, our areas where we don't see. We all have our vices and habits where it looks like that thing outside of us is going to make us happy. And I think addiction just has some different consequences. So there's a stigmatism, but we're all in this together. We're all human and we all get stuck. So thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thanks, Alfie. I loved your story about watching your brother and having that insight about thought. And that was beautiful, because that's oftentimes what happens. It's something so simple that we've seen before, but we don't connect it. And I love that story. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Lisa and Danielle for moderating this incredible panel. And I'm brought to tears many times. Each of you had something very, very special and unique to share about the same thing. And man, we could stop now and it would have been worth the entire conference. So thank you, each of you, so much for sharing from your heart. It was just so beautiful. So we're going to take a break, but we can all hang out here. You can go grab a bite to eat, go to the restroom, but we'll come back in an hour and a half. Is that right, me? And then this afternoon, we're going to hear from Sandy Crott and Barbara Smith and Christian McNeil about what are these three principles anyway? What is this paradigm? So this will put a little meat on the bones of this beautiful stories, or put some bones on the meat of these stories, maybe more appropriate. So I'm going to take a little break, but I'll be back in a few minutes. Grab a bite to eat. You all are welcome.